So what does it mean when the government is shut down? Well, stick around and we're going to talk about what's the impact of the government furlough on contractors and contracting offices. Good evening, Agile acquisition enthusiasts, and welcome back to the Underground Digital Tiki Bar. It's Friday night, and that means it's time for another episode of Agile Acquisitions and Alcohol. So cheers. Okay, on this week's episode, we are talking about the government shutdown. It sucks, but it's something we have to deal with. We're pretty used to it at this point. And a question came in from Josh Seckel of Savant Incorporated, and he was wondering, what's the impact on the contracting process when the government shuts down? This is a great question. Well, there's a lot of nuances of what a government shutdown is and isn't, and how it affects the acquisition process. So I'm not going to get into depth on what this shutdown is or isn't, but I will just simply say this is a partial shutdown. So a lot of the federal government is operating because it's been funded already. So for those agencies, there really isn't an impact at all, business as usual. Unfortunately, for those agencies like DHS, for example, that have not received appropriations, their budget has not been passed, there is an impact. And so the question is, what does it mean for contractors and what does it mean for contracting offices? Well, for contractors, it depends. If your contract has been fully funded and you are not dependent on government offices to do your work, then there's a better than good chance that you can keep doing your work. It may, however, mean you're not going to get paid on time if the part of the department necessary for approving invoices and submitting the payments is not working, because they're not going to be doing that, so you won't get paid until that process is done. That can be a little stressful. But you should be allowed to work. Your contracting officer should give you the direction of whether or not you should continue working or not. So please, double check with your contracting officer to make sure, or whatever essential personnel has been remained in place to answer those sort of questions if they didn't before the shutdown occurred. That should have been part of the orderly shutdown process. For those that are in agencies that have their funding and their budgets and everything, then the contracting process continues to go. Again, business as usual. For those agencies that don't, it's unlikely that the essential personnel are going to be moving acquisitions along. So if you had submitted a proposal, for example, and that proposal had been received by the agency and it was under the evaluation process, it's really unlikely that that evaluation process is going, because the chances of everybody who's part of an evaluation being determined to be essential and continuing an acquisition or selection process, it's just unlikely. I have seen situations where an acquisition itself was determined essential, and therefore everybody who was part of that acquisition was determined essential for the purposes of keeping it, but that's unusual. I wouldn't count on that. So, again, you can check back in and see what's going on. You probably won't get the answer you're hoping to hear, but you'll at least get an answer, and that's better than nothing. As far as RFPs coming out, this is all going to impact schedules. So these agencies that people aren't there working, doing the daily grind, if there was schedules that they'd put out of when an RFP was coming out, you should expect those RFPs are probably going to be delayed, maybe even a day-for-day slip for all the time that the government or that part of the government shut down. So that's essentially the impact. Nobody knows exactly when this is all going to wrap up or what the decisions are going to be as far as people getting reimbursed. But for contracts, a contract is a contract. The government is obliged to it unless they terminate portions of it. So whatever they said they were going to do, they're required to do. And if there are delays, and those delays impact schedule, then contractors have a right for an equitable adjustment to account for this is a government-caused delay or a government-caused burden to the program, and if that impacts the costs or schedule, then the contractor is well within the right to go after some sort of equitable adjustment to make the project whole, so they can deliver as anticipated. So there you have it. That's the government furlough. Josh, appreciate the question. It's pretty straightforward, so I hope that answered it. If you have any more questions, please submit them in the section below. If you haven't already, please subscribe to these videos. And remember, keep innovating. And until next week, cheers.